Good morning, Team Hooligan. It's Karen Hooley, and welcome to Live Wednesday. So excited you're here, and a lot of you have already gotten into chat and started posting. I tried to get them all up on the screen before we started. And before we totally get started, just want to let everybody know that allergies have totally kicked in. I have been sneezing, coughing, itchy eyes since like Friday. So if I sound a little rough, if I start coughing or sneezing, I'm not sick. It's just my allergies. It's driving me crazy. But just so you guys know what's going on over here. So it's good to see you. I'm so glad everybody's here. Well, I see Linda and Daisy May are here, and Joyce is here watching from work. Laura is watching from work also, and Kelly's here. Let's see who else. Pat. Kathy's here. First time watching from Wisconsin. Hello. I'm so glad you're here. Got confetti for new watchers, so I'm so excited you're here. Let's see who else is here. Love the t-shirt. Awesome. Thank you. I love it too. I'm going to probably have the Team Hooligans shirts on my website again. I'm just trying to find a new place to get them because the original place was totally sold out of all of the colors that I had. So, and they're not bringing them back. So I'm going to try a different place. So hopefully soon I'll have them. Teresa's here. Good morning. And Anna Louisa's here. Good morning. I'm so glad you guys are all here. So if you pop in, make sure that you say hello and say where you're from so that everybody can get to know each other. This week, I've decided to do something new. I've been doing my streams a little bit new overall. But every last Wednesday of the month, I've decided I get so many questions lately that I'm going to do a completely new thing, and it's going to be Q&A. And I have, if you are a subscriber to my newsletter, you should have seen that I have a form where you can ask, or you can submit questions. And the first 3 questions I'm going to talk about today are definitely going to be from that form and from my survey that I did in January. And then on anybody who's new to my newsletter always gets us that question as part of their onboarding. So I've got 3 questions that I knew I could answer today, but if you have a question, I'm going to put it down at the bottom of the screen. Any kind of crochet question. It can be about my patterns. It can be about a technique. It can be about whatever it has to do with crochet itself. Just make sure you just type a Q and then add the question in the comments. And then that'll allow me to queue them up so that I can answer them as they come in. So again, today's topic is crochet Q&A. It's going to be every last Wednesday of the month. So if you ever have questions, I am going to put the link to the form in the description after the show is over. I forgot to do it before I went live, and I remembered right before I hit the live button. So I will put it in the description, and then it'll always be in the description from now on. So there's that. And then, as you guys know, for those of you who've been watching since for about the last 2 weeks, I've started another new thing, and I give away a 1 free pattern every live stream to those who are here watching. And this week's pattern is tinctured, and this is a shawl, and I'm gonna have to. I had it on my desk folded weird, but this is tinctured. It's done with 2 hanks of fingering weight yarn. The yarn, I don't know if I know the pink color or the burgundy color here is still available. I don't know if the variegated is still available, but I have a copy of the pattern here to show you. This is the actual pattern itself, and the yarn is Dragonfly Fibers Ginny Sock. And it's superwash merino cashmere and nylon. The kaleidoscope, I'm not 100% sure. That's the colorway. So this is a kaleidoscope, and this one is called Jocelyn. And Jocelyn, I'm pretty sure, is still available. I actually designed this shawl for the Yarn Over truck. Kaleidoscope was a custom dye for this particular shawl, and they were doing. So that's why I'm saying I don't know if they still have it, if it's still available, that kind of thing. But if you wanted to do it in these colors, but it looks great in solids, you know, completely solid, 2 different solid colors. It looks great with speckles and stuff like that. So if you're interested in winning, what you have to do, and let me share my screen here really quick, is in the comments, type in hashtag Team Hooligan. I decided to use Team Hooligan because I am wearing it on my shirt. So if you type in hashtag Team Hooligan, and I found out that if you even use Team Hooligan or this hashtag Team Hooligan in a comment or a question, you will automatically be entered anyway. So you don't have to just do a separate post, but you can. I mean, you can just type in Team Hooligan. So if you're interested in winning, make sure you do that, this pattern. So I'm going to go back to the comments here really quick and see. I saw there's a couple new people popped in. Oh, cool. Okay, so we have Francis. Oh, it's 5 a.m. on Thursday. Oh, I didn't realize you were that far ahead of us. Good morning, Francis. I hope you're awake. And good morning, Charlene. It's good to see you. And Stephanie, good morning. And Vita, good morning. And I see a bunch of Team Hooligans coming in. So awesome. Okay, so make sure that if you have a question, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for a second. If you have a question to ask me that is crochet related, make sure you put a Q in front because that allows me to find them easily and actually share a little bit about what's going on. I can queue them up and I can answer them. But the first 3 questions I'm going to answer today were from my survey because I wasn't sure if you guys were going to be ready for questions today. So the first question came from Cheryl A. And I've got it, had to type it up in 2 screens here. She says she feels like crochet patterns turn out more chunky. So I tend to just fall back on granny square blankets and then use knit for garments. I'm not sure if it's the yarn or the actual stitches that makes it turn out that way. Well, Cheryl, I don't know if you're here or not. If you're watching after the fact, I did email all 3 of these people that I'm going to be answering their questions to let them know that I was going to be answering them live. So you might be watching live, you might be watching after the fact. But this is a common question I get too. And the question of if it's the actual yarn or the stitches that make it turn out that way, yes to both. First of all, especially nowadays, it seems like a lot of the bloggers and the influencers that give away free patterns on their blog or on their social media, things like that, and then offer maybe a paid pattern in Ravelry or somewhere else. What they have been using are chunkier yarns. And I do understand that a lot of people have, I guess the best way to describe this is they want to get things done quickly. And so designing a sweater in worsted weight is going to make it chunky. Using a chunky stitch, crochet is automatically chunkier than knitting is. And if anybody has comments about this question, make sure you pop into the chat and let me know too, because and let me know what your comments are. But what I have done with my crochet garments and even shawls and everything else that I design is I tend to go down to finer weight yarn. So for example, my book, Pineapple Passion, which you can find at my website, is all made, with the exception of one pattern, with lace weight yarns. So all of the shawls, all of this clothing, the skirt is lightweight. It doesn't look chunky. Let me find the sweater that I want to show you. Well, this is a tunic type of thing. See, it's not so chunky. Also, if you, where's my sweater? I know it's in here. Here it is. Let me find that. Okay, so this is my pineapple cardigan. It's not chunky. It's done in lace weight yarn. So if you want to crochet garments, because crocheting garments is actually a lot faster than knitting garments. I mean, I can tell you because I'm knitting a garment right now and I had put it aside because I'm getting so bored with stockinette. I put it aside for a while. But crocheting garments with fingering weight makes things less bulky. Here's another example of a tank top I've done in fingering weight yarn that has a little bit of silk in it. This is my most popular sweater pattern out there ever. It's called Beachcomber, and it is a waffle stitch sweater that is done in lace weight yarn. And it really doesn't take that long because I'm using taller stitches. So it's going really, really quick. So garments, if you're trying to crochet garments, look for patterns that are using finer yarns because you're reducing the size of your hook, you're reducing the size of your yarn. So it makes everything thinner and less bulky and less, chunky. And I used to say you look like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man when you're wearing a double crochet cardigan or a double crochet pullover done in worsted or bulky weight yarns. So I try to maybe DK once in a while, but I try to stick with fingering sport and smaller. So Cheryl, I hope that answers your question. I see that there's some comments. I'm just going to check and see. I see a bunch of questions coming in. So, oops, that one's in. Okay, I just see a bunch of questions. Okay, perfect. Okay, so anybody have any questions on that for me before I go on to the next question? I saw another comment coming in. Oh, Linda put her Team Hooligan in. Okay. Okay, so second question. And I'm going to share my screen for this question to answer this question. So first, I'm going to tell you what the question is. Robin H. writes in Z twist versus S twist. I struggle with S twist yarns in crocheting and welcome techniques to stop the untwisting of yarn, especially plant fibers. Okay, so first I'm going to share a different tab here on my screen. And I'm going to bring it up and I'm going to try to, can you guys see that? I'm going to bring a magnifier over. Does that help at all? Bringing in the magnifier. Let me do it this way. Can you guys see that? Okay, so first of all, the question is, what is S twist and what is Z twist? And basically S and Z are which direction the fibers are twisted when they actually make the yarn. And so in S twist, if you look at this where I've got the magnifying glass on the S twist, if you notice the central part of the S, the angle that the central part is, so you make a curve at the top and then you come down and then you make the bottom part of the S. An S twist has the higher end on the left and the lower end on the right. Can you see that here? The S is the higher end and then the lower end. Where the Z twist is the opposite. So it's like a Z where the higher end is on the right and the lower end is on the left. Does that make sense so far? Does that help? Oops, let me take. So if that helps, I'm gonna just turn off my, okay, there we go. Okay, so that's what S and Z mean. So does anybody have questions about that at all? Oh, Joyce, that's why you prefer DK or lighter. Yep, exactly, because of the chunkiness of the shawl. Okay. And okay, so I just wanted to make sure I didn't have any more questions here. All right, so let's talk about S and Z twist. Now, there is a school of thought in the crochet industry that right-handed crocheters, now there's a handedness to this, that right-handed crocheters should crochet with a Z twist because of the way the twist is in the yarn, and it causes splitting more often if you're doing an S twist. While that can be true sometimes, I do not ascribe to that philosophy. I'm not subscribed to it. I do not believe that's true because there are other factors involved in why yarn splits. Okay. So, and if it's left-handed, you should be using the S twist because of the way the twist and the hook goes through. And while yes, it can happen, I don't believe that you have to go one way or the other because of the yarn is untwisting. Now, there's a couple reasons why plant fibers tend to untwist when you're crocheting, and that is because they don't always ply them super tight. With crochet, you always want to try to find yarns that have a tight twist. Doesn't matter if it's S or Z, does not matter. That is the first thing if you want to prevent twisting. Okay, so let's say you can't find, let's say you have 100% silk, it's 3 fibers, they didn't twist it tightly. Okay. Number 2 is you need to change the hook you're using. Go up a hook size, switch between a Boy and a Bates. I find that Susan Bates, because of the way, I don't know if you guys can see that, but you see how the hook at the top is made? It's like almost just a slit rather than the Boy that has more of a bowl there to catch more yarn. I truly believe that Susan Bates hooks with loosely twisted yarn is going to be very splitty. I find that for myself, that's why I use Boy more often. Also, it's because maybe you're using too small of a hook for your yarn and you need a bigger bowl and you need something that, and it also depends on if you're a knife holder like I am, or if you are a pencil holder, which I also do when I need to switch up and my wrists are getting tired. I noticed that if you're a knife holder, the Boy works better than the Susan Bates when you're grabbing your yarn to pull through. If you're a pencil holder, it's kind of a toss-up for me with for me, the way I crochet. I can still use the Susan Bates, but if the yarn is twisty, or not twisty, it's too loosely plied, I still split with the Susan Bates. So I recommend getting a different hook and changing your size. You can use a larger hook to be able to grab your yarn and still get gauge. And that last week when I talked about gauge and about adjusting the golden loop with, up and down, or, pulling harder to make stitches shorter, things like that, you can still use a little bit bigger hook that has a better catch on your yarn. Because when I learned to crochet in 1974, there was no such thing in the commercial yarn industry, at least that I ever saw, about an S and a Z twist. Now, if you were a spinner at the time, yeah, you probably learned about it, but nobody talked about S and Z twist. And so, I learned to crochet with some really loosely plied yarns, and I never had a problem with splitting because I learned right off the bat from my grandmother that changing the hook will fix that kind of thing. So I truly, truly believe that there isn't an option, and there's not a lot of options with Z twists unless you're a spinner and you spin your own yarns, or you find a spinner who only plies Z. I don't know of that many. I think I know for a while Lion Brand had one. I don't know if it's still out there. I didn't look. I should have looked before I got live this morning. Also, I believe it's Vashti Braha has her Lotus yarns. I think she still has them. I haven't been on her site for a while. I've been kind of like hunkered down doing my own thing. So I haven't really checked with everybody else. I know she has a Z twist, but other than that, cannot honestly give you other brands unless you are a spinner yourself and you spin your own yarns. So I hope that's helpful, Robin, and I hope that's helpful to everybody else. No worries. Renee, I saw you popped in. You're fine. No worries about being late. You're all here. I'm glad you're here. And okay, so I'm going to go to the third question I have prepared, and then I'll go to everybody else's. I see them coming in, so I've already queued them up. Let's go to the third question that I had ready to go. And this is from Kathy. And again, I had to do it in two parts. So the first part is, I generally use red heart yarns or Bernat and find often I end up with one that seems soft. The Afghan I'm working on is Red Heart Super Saver, and it seems rough. I know it called for a different yarn. I made it before, and it's soft. Been trying to use up the yarn I had got from my mom when she passed away. Now, Kathy, first of all, I want to say I'm sorry for your loss. I know I got all my grandmother's yarn, and it was really difficult when she passed away. So, but being able to use something that was hers was really wonderful for me. Now, roughness and softness. Okay, I've been using Red Heart and Bernat and Karen yarns and Lion Brand and all of them since the 70s. I mean, the ones that were available back then were always a little bit more rough than the ones that are available now. And that has to do with, at least back then, I don't know that they still do this now. I'm pretty sure they do to make the yarns shelf stable, but they used to put something on it. It was a chemical, some treatment or something that they called sizing that allows it to be in a store that could be dusty. I mean, I know when I was buying yarn, I would go to Sprouts Ritz in California. I don't know how many of you might remember Sprouts Ritz, but it was like a dime store almost. It was like a pharmacy with you know, all sorts of stuff. It was like the old time stores. I mean, well, I guess I'm aging myself now because those were big back then. But you know, and sometimes those stores would be dusty and, you know, that kind of thing. And so the yarn had the sizing on it, and then when you washed it, it became soft. Now, over the years, at least I've noticed with Super Saver, and I pulled Super Saver here for this purpose. This is a lot softer than the Super Saver I remember back in the day. I'm sure that yarn making in the acrylic industry has changed quite a bit, first of all. And you are going to find that if you have older yarns and newer yarns, and they might be the same color, the older yarns are going to be a little more rough than the newer yarns. Working with the yarn can make it soft. Acrylic, not so much, but if you're working with wools and things like that, sometimes it'll be really, really rough to the touch in the hank or the skein. And then as you work with it and create your stitches, it softens up the yarn, and sometimes it gets a halo, which is where it gets fuzzy and it starts to bloom. So that is a thing that does happen with yarns. But if you have something that's a little more rough, and then you have one skein that's a little softer, I would bet they're one's older than the other, or you know, the dye process changed. I know the dyeing processes have changed since the old days, what I'm going to call the old days, the 70s, and things like that. And I'm sure the creation of actual acrylic yarns has changed as well. So I don't keep up with the actual manufacturing of acrylic yarn, but I know that I've had hanks or skeins of yarn that were Red Heart from like the 80s. And then I had one in the 90s, the early 2000s, and the feel of them were so different. In fact, if you look at my book on my website, I have a book. It's just a digital book called Simply Blankets. Just about I think every blanket in there, except for one, except for Pink Memories. were made with Red Heart Super Saver. And there's one in particular that I can tell you, the stained glass Afghan, or the blanket. I changed the name to blankets. The stained glass blanket was made with the colored yarns, where some of them were from the late 70s and 80s. And then the black I bought in the early 2000s, and the feel of them were so different. I mean, they were the same weight. I didn't have to worry about one being thinner than the other, but just the feel of them until I washed them, washed the blanket and blocked it, they did feel different. The colors were a lot rougher than the black was. So I hope that helps. I hope, and if anybody has any questions on that, I hope you popped them into the comments. Okay. Anybody have anything to say about any of that I just talked about? Okay. I am just going to, just as a reminder, I'm going to put this back up. If you're interested in winning this shawl pattern, it is the tinctured shawl. You go ahead and type in Team Hooligan in the chat. And this is just a copy of the print pattern. I will send you a digital pattern if you are the winner. Senna will be drawing that just before I end the program. So I just wanted to pop that in there really quick to do that. So let's go to our queued up comments and see who's got questions for me. Okay, so Kelly says, do you have a designer that you enjoy or fangirl over? Anyone, especially for crochet garments? Crochet garments is hard. I'll be honest with you, Melissa Leitman's probably my favorite crochet designer for garments. I have her book. I don't have it close enough that I can grab it, but she has a book out called Cool Crochet. It's old. It's probably at least 10, 15 years old. But that was one of the first crochet garment books I ever got. And I absolutely love her design philosophy, the way she puts things together. She does a lot of crochet garments that are classic, timeless, and that kind of thing. So I would say probably Melissa Leitman, but that's a great question, Kelly. Trying to think if there's anybody else out there that I enjoy there. There's a few people that I follow on Instagram. And I've been off Instagram, actually watching the feed since Ash Wednesday. So I haven't been watching lately, but I do know that there are some younger crochet designers who do some really cool designs, but they're always in the heavier yarns. And I like the construction technique. I don't like the look of the finished garment. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So that would be where I go with that one. But thanks. That's a great question. Okay, Stephanie in Texas. For my blue suede socks pattern, what size B? Oh, okay. So that is actually something that I didn't realize I didn't do. I just do the regular seed beads. I think they were 8s, 8 zeros. I will have to pull out those socks and look at them, but I don't think they're any. They might have been 6s now that I think about it, because they're a little bit bigger. So 6/0. I don't know how else to call them. They had to be 6s because 8 gets a little too small for even fingering weight sometimes. So that's where I would start. That's what I used. I'd have to look to be sure, but I'm almost positive they're 6s. Does that help, Stephanie? Okay. Next question. I'll check the chats here or the chat comments here in a second. I just saw that there's some lives. Hang on one second. Linda says, I've noticed that some colors are more coarse than others. I made 2 baby blankets years ago, one in an off-white. Yes, and they both felt different. In the same yarns, yes. And that's a dye process thing too. There are certain dyes that will transform the yarns a little bit more differently than the regular yarns. So then another color, I should say, especially in acrylic, because acrylic is a petroleum product and it can melt it a little bit. So sometimes you'll find too, especially with in the old days, I mean in the 70s and 80s, I should not call it the old days, guys. I'm not that old. But in the 70s and 80s, I would notice I could buy a white and a black, and the black would be thinner than the white because the dye caused a process to happen, some sort of reaction to the yarn, and it would make it thinner than the white. So there is that. So that is definitely, and Linda did say that, the dye used to do that. And Pat says, I find that to be true. Yes, and Super Saver seems to be that way too. And dyes do that. And I'm wondering if they still put the sizing in, if in that respect. Renee Bryant, seed beads, yes. And but they, yeah. And Stephanie says I thought they might be 6 zeros. Yep. I'm pretty sure that's what they are. I found that yes, and Karen yarns. And Karen yarns never used to be that way. When I went, especially with Dazzle Air, I mean, I don't know that Dazzle Air is still around anymore, but Dazzle Air never had that problem other than the thick and thin part. But I never had the difference in the roughness. It seems like as things have changed with Karen yarns, the feel of the yarns. I mean, even Simply Soft, there are some colors that are rougher than others. It feels like the good old days, though, but I am old. Linda, you're not that old. Okay, let's go back to our comments here. And the next question is from Laura. Yarn substitution. As a designer, what's the best way for us to substitute another weight other than the one you designed with? Okay, so it depends on the project. I will be honest with you. It truly depends on the project. If you're going to make a garment, let's say, and I designed it in fingering or lace weight, and you want to use DK or worsted, my first thing that I would say is try to find a yarn that has the same fiber content, first of all. So if I used 100% superwash wool, find 100% superwash wool. If I have a little bit of nylon in it, find a wool with a nylon blend, that kind of thing. I would say that would be my first thing. Then the second thing is you would have to create a swatch, at least 6 to 8 inches, especially with a garment. So at least 6 to 8 inch swatch both directions, and create it in a gauge that you like with that yarn. That like for a garment and shawls, you want to have a lot of drape to it. That's super, super important. You want to have a lot of drape. So you're probably going to use a larger hook than is recommended on the skein, first of all, or the hank. And then once you do that, you're going to have to do the math to get the dimensions of what you want. So if you don't know how to do take, for example, with my sweaters, I always have a schematic. So here is the schematic for the pineapple shawl or the pineapple cardigan. What you need to do is figure out your size, find out the square inches of each piece, and figure out from your swatch how much yarn per square inch you need. And that's a whole other class I could teach on, finding this. So if, for example, if you have 5 yards per square inch and you need over the size of the sweater, you need, let's say 500 square inches. I'm just throwing numbers out there. I don't even know if they make sense, but 500 square inches, but you need 5 yards per square inch. So you would multiply 500 by 5 to get your yardage. And then I always add 10% to that when I go to buy yarn for something like that, so that you can so that you can be sure that you have enough yardage for that yarn. And then basically you need to pick the size that you want based on that gauge to make that sweater. Now with a shawl, it's not so, shawl doesn't have to fit a body, but you don't want your shawl too big or too small either. So you kind of have to do some math in there as well. But the first thing I recommend, unless you absolutely can't find a yarn that you like in the fiber content that I originally used, that's my first thing. Is I always try to find, because it gives you at least a similar look, even if it's going to be chunkier or finer. Because that's the other thing too, is I might be designing something in DK and you want to do it in lace weight. It's the same idea, but you're going the opposite direction. You're going to need a different way of doing things. You might need more yards per square inch and lace weight than you do in DK. So hopefully that makes sense. I see a bunch of comments out there. So let me see here. Let's see. Hi, Bonnie, you're here. Hello. It's good to see you. It's good to see you. Linda, the doctor just discussed a heart condition. I know. You should not feel ancient. You're fine. You're going to be fine. I know you are. It's hard when you have a new diagnosis, though. I understand that. But don't feel ancient at all, because my mom had the same heart condition in her 50s. So, or actually late 40s, because the first time she passed out she was in her 40s. I remember I was young. And then Francis says at 62, I'm still younger than my older sister. See, I'm the oldest of two girls. So I lord it over her, though, that I look younger because I'm shorter. She's like 6 inches taller than I am. And so I always tell her that her height makes up for my age. So she's only 2 years younger than me. So let's see. I saw ripple afghans like I used to make from kits in a museum. Oh my goodness. In a museum in Oklahoma. So perhaps I belong there too. Oh my gosh. Well, I guess that makes sense, because ripple afghans have been around for a very long time. I mean, longer than the traditional 70s blankets. I know my grandmother had some back in Italy and everything in the early 1900s. So that would make sense. But still, no. My best friend and I were 9 months apart, and I'm older by 9 months. And we always say that we're as young as we feel, and we do not feel, both of us do not feel our age, except for when I'm having my cancer treatments. Then I might feel my age, but I don't feel my age. I could still be a 20-year-old. So there you go. If God grants me my next birthday, I'll be 70. That's not that old. It means I will live longer than my mother. Oh, wow. And you will. Yeah, yes, you are. Absolutely. Absolutely. Bonnie, good to see you, Lindy. Yay. Yeah, we do have a great community. It's so much fun having all these crocheters. And that's my whole point of doing these lives, is to create community. It's so important these days to have community. In fact, I'm not ready to announce it all yet, but coming this summer, I have an even more exciting news about building community. So we'll be there. Absolutely. Okay, let me see here. Any questions? Thank you. I'm so glad. I don't know if you saw the beginning of the show, but I am in the midst of massive allergies. So I have a lot of makeup covering my red nose from sneezing and blowing my nose so much. So, but I am feeling better. That's for sure. I would just wish it wasn't allergy season now. Laura says, yes, it makes sense. Perfect sense. Most of the time, yarn substitutions are very close, but sometimes finding what a project was designed in can be very tricky. And that's so true, Laura. I have a lot of old patterns that are still really popular. My number one pattern right now is my Modern Metro pattern, which was only released in 2019, but that yarn has not been available. I think, when did Blueprint sell? 2 years ago, 3 years, 2 years ago. They sold Blueprint, Craftsy, then they turned to Blueprint, and then they turned back to Craftsy. So when Blueprint sold to the company that now has Craftsy again, that yarn went away, and I'm still selling that like hotcakes. But the yarn's no longer available. So if you have here's a tip for you, for those of you who are looking to make my Modern Metro. Not only right now am I doing videos on YouTube channel. I just launched 2 of them yesterday and the day before, and I'll have the 3rd one coming out tomorrow. They're older videos. I've finally decided to make them live to everybody and not just to the people who bought the pattern. But if you want to make Modern Metro, you can use Cascade 220. You can use Red Heart Super Saver. The original yarn was a wool acrylic blend. So any worsted weight acrylic blend. And that sweater is a good example of worsted weight working for a garment. So Cheryl, if you're watching this, when we talked about chunky, because that garment was meant to be chunky. It's a stitch that has drape. It was a blocked to have drape, but it's still worsted weight. Now, it was designed in worsted weight because that's what I was asked to design it in when Craftsy or Blueprint asked me to do it. However, using a cotton yarn, even I'd be careful with cottons though, because they tend to stretch and then they have no memory to spring back. So don't use something that's super heavy there. But a wool blend, an acrylic, all of those should work for that shawl. And with the shipping issues lately, yes. In fact, have you guys noticed? I have a grandson coming in July, and I was looking for acrylic yarn to make a blanket, and I can't find Red Heart at Michael's. I mean, they have the spots, but the bins are empty. And even online, I've tried to order colors for her room, and the colors are all out of stock. So I don't know if that's something that is shipping, or if I don't know what it is, but it's just very odd to me. Or if Michael's is doing away with it, I don't know. Linda says, if only the good die young, I'll probably be here for 200 years. Oh, no. That's funny though. Okay. Just like oh wow. Oh, the traditional kits for those ripples. Oh wow. Okay. I don't think I've ever used recommended yarn. Hard to get many different brands in New Zealand. And that makes sense, Francis. That's the other thing. Now that the internet has opened up pattern sales to the world. I mean, back when I started I actually started selling patterns on my website probably like 96, 97. I sold my first pattern to a magazine in 98. But it was pretty much, just Americans that were doing, that were buying my patterns. I don't know why that is, but the groups didn't have a whole lot of international. And then when Ravelry opened up, it was like the whole world opened up. So trying to find different brands, it's hard. That's why I always, in my patterns at least, I always say what the weight is. And I know for those of you in New Zealand that you don't call it fingering weight, you call it 4-ply. And as things go on, I will, try to put in there not only fingering weight, but it'll also say 4-ply, or, to try to be a little more usable for those of you who are not in the United States. But you still should be able to find similar brands. Wool, whether it's sheep wool or goat wool or, Kiviat or whatever. You can find similar blends I know in Australia, there's possums really big, that kind of thing. So yeah, I bet that is really hard to do. Laura says, for the shop, Cascading Universal's another company you can use for my Monometro, by the way, have been great on shipping times. Circulo. I looked up Circulo. I never saw them before. So they're actually someone I may have to reach out to just and grab some yarns from them and try them out. But yeah, Cascade is local to me. They're on the west side of the state. They were not that far from where I used to live, and they are a great company. I mean, just overall, in general, when I was working for my local yarn shop, they would stop in all the time, and they were the easiest company to work with as a shop that I thought, at least at that time. That was in the late 2000s, early 2010s that I worked there. And Universal, I've been working with Universal for years, and they have probably my biggest yarn support people as far as sponsoring classes for me. So I absolutely love Universal. Okay, let's talk about the next question. So I got Laura's question. Frances asks, does it matter which end of the ball you start with? Good question. Actually, I have not seen it make a difference, except there are yarns out there that and this is applies more to knitting than crochet, because I have yet to see this happen in crochet. But there are some sock yarns out there that are called self-patterning. I can't say that word this morning. My allergies are not letting me say it. Patterning. There we go. Self-patterning sock yarns, which means that if you use the right gauge with the right needles, when you're knitting your socks, it automatically creates these cool little pictures in your socks. And if you try to crochet with that yarn, all bets are off. The patterns don't work out at all. I've tried it just for the heck of it, and just to prove to people that it's not going to work for crochet. But with those kinds, there may be, I've seen a couple brands that have put start at this end, kind of like, I don't know if you guys have Red Heart in New Zealand, but Red Heart has where to pull the yarn from on theirs for these types of skeins. They recommend pulling from the center. When I cake up my own yarn, let me pull a cake out here. Okay. So this yarn was in a hank like this. And I wound it on my yarn winder into a cake. I have found you can pull from the center on these. However, depending on how your start goes, if you have a lot of bumps and stuff, sometimes the yarn gets tangled and you end up having yarn barf, is what we used to call it at the yarn shop. So I learned when I was working from the yarn shop that even when you cake yarn, pull from the outside to prevent having issues while you're actually working your project. If you're going to do it that way, and you have like a gradient yarn that goes, maybe from white to a pale blue to a darker blue to a navy, and then it changes maybe to green or whatever, and you want to go in a specific direction. So if you wanted to start with the white and maybe the last color was black and you want to go from white to black, you need to make sure you wind the yarn in the way that you want it to turn out when you're crocheting. So whether you pull from the center or whether you pull from the outside, that's the only thing that you would want to kind of keep an eye on. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So, but normally I would say it doesn't make a difference unless the yarn tells you, like Red Heart Super Saver tells you to do, or you wind it a certain way. That would be my question. Does that make sense, Frances? Just want to make sure there's no comments here. Yeah. Okay. So, last question, it looks like. Renee asks, is there a correct or preferred way to turn crochet work, clockwise or counterclockwise? I don't think so. I don't think it matters. My nonna, when she taught me to crochet, and you'll notice this in the way I write my patterns, is I always say at the beginning of the row, chain 3 and turn, or chain 2 and turn. Okay. So what my nonna taught me is that the turning chain should be made first before you turn. And the reason she says that is because when you especially with the longer stitches, and this was so true when I was doing a lot of thread work, and I'm finding that it's in my crochet experience with fingering weights, lace weights, even DK. What it does is it allows the turning chain to twist just enough to tighten it up. So, for example, a lot of people use, including myself, use a chain 2 as the turning chain for a double crochet because it tightens things up. You don't have such big holes. But in certain yarns, I will still chain 3 and turn because A, maybe I want a little bit bigger space there, but B, that twist is enough to allow me to use the chain 3 to manage the height of my stitches. Does that make sense? Because the turning chain is there to help not only become the first stitch in some cases, but also to help determine the height of your stitch and help you keep your gauge even all the way across your row. And so when you do that, it twists it just enough to keep it keep it tighter against the fabric. Now, for me, when I crochet, I do a chain 3 and I turn. I always turn clockwise. I'm right-handed, and I always turn clockwise. However, when I'm working like on a scarf that might be 60 inches long, and I'm working on the short end, and when it gets longer, I find I turn both directions so that I don't twist the scarf as much or the shawl as much. So I don't really feel that there is, and you always have to turn the same direction, because I haven't found in my experience that it makes that much of a difference. There might be stitches out there that, yeah, it does, but in my experience with what I've done, I don't think it's really an issue. Does that make sense? You're welcome, Francis. That's great. I'm glad that helped. And yes, I think I will follow what your nonna says. It makes everything look more professional. My nonna was quite the professional crocheter. With everything that she did. I mean, she was a seamstress. She used to sew all her own clothes. She sewed for a theater group. She crocheted for a theater group. She sewed for her church in Italy. She sewed clothes for me when I was a little kid, my sister, my cousins. And she did everything. It was her words was fino, fino, fino. And fino is fine in English. Fine, 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 which means that in Italian, the word fine means everything needs to look neat and tidy, and at the front of the work needs to look as good as the back of the work, especially in embroidery. When I was learning the embroidery, it didn't matter. The way I wove in my tails for my embroidery, it's had to be neat and tidy, and there was no bulk. And so all of that has kind of come back to me with what I do. So, okay. So Renee, did that make sense for you on that question? I hope that made sense. Okay, I'm going to pop this back up one more time. If you want to win a copy of Tinctured, make sure you type in Team Hooligan in the chat, because I'm going to be drawing that for that pattern here in a little bit. So make sure you do that. Oh, yes, thanks. Perfect. I'm glad. I'm glad that helped. So anybody else before we get ready to close here? If anybody else have any questions? Oh, Linda says, Nonna is a woman after my own heart. I love neatness. Her house, you could eat off her floors. They were so clean. And my mom was the same way when it came to housekeeping. So I mean, literally the spotless all the time. So make sure you have your team hooligans in the chat. Anybody else have a question for me before we go? Before I do the drawing? Trying to think. There's nothing new in the shop or in the studio this week. I'm trying to think. I am getting ready to rearrange my office a little bit. I think I told you guys about this. The lighting in here, with the way my windows are, I've discovered that I need to have my desk in a different place when I'm doing these, and have my camera in a different place. So, and I've tried, I tried the chair thing. I tried, and you guys like my desk the best. So, I am switching my room around so that the lighting's a little better. Today, actually, I have an umbrella light here with the silver to put the fill in on my face because of the way the lighting is. And that actually helped a little bit. But when I am creating videos, especially now that I actually was asked by a friend of mine who works for Girl Scouts if I would do some videos for Girl Scouts in the area that they can just do to learn to crochet, so that I don't have to necessarily come to camp with them. They can just play these videos when they're learning to crochet, and I can be, either on Zoom or something. So I want to have a certain setup for that, and by changing my desk around is going to make that work. So I'm hoping that by next week I'll have the new setup and see what you guys think. But other than that, that's the only new thing that's going on around here. I've got some yarn on order for some projects, and I've got. You guys know that this year, or this last round of treatments, has been really hard on me, really hard on me. I'm finally, last night was the first night I slept for more than 4 hours solid. I actually slept for 9 hours solid without waking up. And that's made me feel so much better this morning. So I think the brain fog is finally starting to lift, which makes me absolutely ecstatic. So so you should start seeing me feeling better and better, other than these stupid allergies. But other than that, I don't have anything else that I can show you right now. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I'm going to last call to type in Team Hooligan. And then, Kelly, thank you. And great to hear. I know sleep is the hardest thing with cancer treatments, at least for me. I don't know about anybody else. I cannot speak to anybody else on that. But for me, getting enough sleep is the hardest thing until I turn that corner. So, yay. Your beginner tutorials are great. Girl Scouts love them. Thank you. Prayers for brain fog to go. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited that it's starting to lift. So it's hard too, because I haven't been in the mood to design as much. I mean, I've done a lot of swatching, but I haven't actually started any projects because I just feel like my math brain's not working. So, okay, guys, we have entries, last call before I hit the draw button. So I'm going to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and here we go. Kathy, you're the winner. I'm glad you're here. So, Kathy, I don't know if the way I do this is I put the pattern in your account on the website. So I will look for your account. If I don't find it, shoot me an email. And I will send you the pattern. But what I like to do is I like to put it in your account on my website so that you can download it whenever you need it. So you always have it. So if you lose it, if your computer crashes or anything like that, you will always have a copy that you can download from my website. So I will touch base with you soon, shortly. But congratulations. I'm excited that you are here. And it was your first time. And I should probably since it was your first time and you won, I'm going to do the confetti for you. So that was exciting. I'm really glad. So for the rest of you guys, I'm so glad you were here, and I'll be giving away another pattern next week. So, and congratulations. I see lots of congratulations coming on here, but thank you guys so much for being here. The one thing about these treatments is that I know that you guys are here every Wednesday, and that is something that I absolutely look forward to, because community is what I need right now, and you guys have been the best community. So I wanted just to say thanks. Have a great rest of the week. May your family and everybody be blessed, and I hope that I will see you next Wednesday. So everyone take care, and I will see you next time. Bye, y'all.